The galaxy had known peace for a long time, or at least that was what the Council told everyone. But peace in words did not mean peace in truth. In the far corners of the galaxy, small wars broke out again and again. Worlds that were weak were taken by those who were strong. Some fought with ships, some fought with soldiers, and some fought with cruelty. Among all of this, humans were new to the stars. Many alien species looked down on them, calling them fragile, calling them soft, calling them weak. But humans were learning, and history had already shown what humans could do when pushed too far. The war that began was not expected. It was not declared by fleets or governments. It started in the shadows, with whispers, with hatred. A colony. World was taken over by a group of aliens who believed power came from fear. They marched into cities, took supplies, and broke families apart. They believed weakness should be punished, and they made examples of those who could not defend themselves. It was here, in a forgotten alley of this captured city, where one story began that no one would forget. The alien girl had never asked for war. She had never wanted to be part of battles or cruelty. She was young, quiet, and beautiful in her own way, her green skin and silver hair marking her as different even among her own people. But difference was dangerous in times of hate. She was dragged out by those who claimed to be her own protectors, thrown into the open, and left to be mocked. Her clothes were ripped away, leaving her trembling and humiliated in front of a crowd that only wanted to laugh. Garbage was thrown at her. Stones, broken food, anything that would make her cry. She tried to cover herself with her hands, but the shame was too much. The laughter grew louder. These were not strangers. They were her own kind, filled with fear, anger, and cruelty, taking it out on the weakest among them. Her silver hair hung in front of her face, her green eyes filled with tears, but she could not look up. Every time she tried to move, more garbage struck her body. She thought this was how it would end. She thought no one would come. No one had ever come before. Why would anyone care now? But someone did care. From the shadows at the end of the alley, footsteps echoed. Strong, steady, unafraid. A figure emerged, taller, broader, carrying scars on his skin. A human. His clothes were dirty from battle, his arm cut and bleeding, but his eyes were sharp, full of fire. The alien stopped laughing for a moment, confused by his presence. A human in this part of the city? That was not expected. The human looked at the girl, then at those throwing garbage. He did not speak at first. He simply walked forward. The aliens laughed again, throwing more trash, this time at him, but he did not flinch. He kept walking, every step slow, deliberate, unstoppable. The girl looked up, her eyes wide with fear. Was he here to mock her too? Was he another cruel hand? In a world full of them? But something in his eyes told her no. Something in the way he moved told her this human was not like the others. When he reached her, he stopped. For a moment, the alley went silent. The only sound was her soft sobbing and the distant hum of a broken city. The human took off his coat. It was rough, patched with holes, worn from many battles. But it was warm, heavy, and real. Slowly, he placed it around her shoulders, covering her trembling body. The girl gasped softly, her fingers gripping the coat tightly. It smelled of smoke, of sweat, of steel, but it was more precious than anything she had ever held. For the first time since the torment began, she felt something other than fear. She felt safe. The crowd grew restless. Some shouted at the human, telling him to leave. Others picked up more garbage, ready to throw. But the human turned his head toward them, his jaw tight, his eyes burning with a fire they had never seen before. He said only one word, a word simple but sharp as a blade. Enough. The crowd hesitated. They were many, and he was only one. But there was something about humans that was hard to understand, something that made others afraid even when they should not be. The aliens muttered, shuffled, but did not throw anything else. The girl, still shaking, pulled the coat tighter around her. She did not know why this human had come. She did not know why he would care when even her own people had not. But in that moment, in the silence after his single word, she began to believe in something she thought had been lost: hope. And this was how it began, not with fleets in space, not with guns or bombs, but with one girl left humiliated, and one human who refused to walk away. The city was broken. Fires burned in the distance, black smoke rising into the skies that once held ships and dreams. The sound of boots echoed in the empty streets, soldiers moving through the ruins like hunters. The war had changed everything. What had once been a place of life and laughter was now nothing more than rubble and fear. And in the middle of this broken world, the human and the alien girl walked together. She clutched the coat tightly around her shoulders. It was far too big for her, the sleeves hanging down past her hands, but it was the only thing that gave her comfort. Every step felt heavy, her legs weak from humiliation and pain, but she forced herself to move. Beside her, the human moved. With strength, his eyes scanning every shadow, his hand always near his weapon. She wanted to ask him why he had helped her. She wanted to speak, to say something, but her voice felt trapped inside her chest. Every time she opened her mouth, the memory of laughter and garbage thrown at her returned, silencing her again. So instead, she walked quietly, her head lowered, her fingers pressing against the rough fabric of the coat. The human finally spoke. His voice was calm, but there was a weight in it. "You don't belong out here," he said. "It's not safe." She lifted her eyes slightly, her voice small. "Nowhere is safe." He looked at her for a long moment, then nodded. "You're right. But with me, at least you're not alone." The words settled deep inside her heart. Not alone. She had been alone for so long she had forgotten what it felt like to hear those words. But safety was an illusion, and the war had no mercy. The sound of heavy footsteps grew louder behind them. The human stopped, his muscles tensing. He turned his head and saw them, 3 alien soldiers, their skin glowing faintly under the dim light, their eyes sharp and cruel. They carried weapons, crude but deadly, and when they saw the human with the girl, their laughter was like knives. "Look at this," one of them sneered. "The human thinks he can protect her." Another soldier raised his weapon. "Hand her over. She belongs to us." The girl's heart froze. She stepped back, her grip on the coat tightening, her breath quickening. She had no strength to run, no courage to fight. But the human did not move back. He stepped forward instead, placing himself between her and the soldiers. "She belongs to no one," he said. His voice was low, but it carried like thunder. Soldiers laughed louder. A human speaking of honor? One mocked, "You're weak, always weak. You should know your place." The human did not reply. He simply raised his weapon, steady and sure. His stance was not of weakness, but of someone who had nothing left to fear. The alley grew silent, the tension like a storm ready to break. The girl's eyes widened as she watched him. She had seen many people fight before, but this was different. This was not about pride or power. This was about something else, something she could not understand yet, but something that made her chest ache with a strange, unfamiliar feeling. The soldiers attacked. Blaster fire lit up the alley, sparks flying from the walls. The human moved quickly, faster than they expected, his body strong, his aim sharp. He struck one soldier down with a single shot, then moved to cover as the others fired back. The girl crouched low, covering her ears, the sound of battle too much for her. But through it all, she kept her eyes on him. The human fought like someone who had already faced death and refused to give in. Every move was precise, every step taken with purpose. He took another soldier down with a burst of fire, leaving only one left. That soldier hesitated now, his earlier cruelty fading into fear. Humans were supposed to be weak. Humans were supposed to be nothing. But this human stood like a mountain, unshaken. The last soldier cursed and ran. His footsteps faded into the distance, leaving only silence and smoke behind. The girl slowly stood, her hands trembling. She looked at the human, his chest rising and falling heavily, his arm bleeding again from a fresh wound. Yet his eyes were calm, steady. He turned to her and asked only one question. "Are you hurt?" She shook her head quickly, her throat too tight to speak. He nodded. "Then we keep moving. There will be more." She wanted to say thank you, but the words felt too small. How could thank you be enough for what he had done? Instead, she walked closer to him, her steps matching his, as though being near him was the only safety left in the galaxy. As they disappeared deeper into the ruined city, the girl realized something. For the first time in her life, she wanted to believe that humans were not weak, not fragile, not what everyone had told her. They were something else. Something dangerous, yes, but also something powerful. Something that could make even the cruelest soldiers run. And in that moment, she understood one truth. This human was not just protecting her. He was protecting what it meant to be human. The night had grown colder. The ruins of the city stretched around them like the skeleton of something long dead. Broken buildings leaned against each other. Streets were filled with ash and silence, and the air carried the smell of smoke and dust. The human led the girl through the dark paths, always careful, always watching for patrols. She followed close behind, the oversized coat dragging across the ground, her small frame almost hidden inside it. Every shadow made her heart beat faster. Every distant sound made her flinch. But when she looked at the human, his back straight, his steps firm, she found herself breathing easier. He moved as though nothing could stop him. They reached an abandoned shelter, a half-destroyed building, with a roof still intact. The human pushed the broken door aside and guided her in. Inside it was quiet, the air thick with dust. He checked the corners, then finally sat down against the wall, letting out a slow breath. His arm was bleeding again, the wound darker now. The girl hesitated before sitting across from him. She looked at his wound, her eyes filled with worry. "You're hurt," she whispered. He shrugged slightly. "I've been hurt before." "But if you lose too much blood," she began, her voice trembling. He interrupted gently. "It doesn't matter. What matters is you. You need rest." Her eyes lowered to the floor. No one had ever spoken to her like that before. Not her people, not her leaders, not anyone. For so long, she had been told she was weak, useless, a burden. And yet this human, who owed her nothing, treated her life as though it mattered. Silence filled the room for a moment. Then she asked softly, "Why? Why do you help me?" The human looked at her, his face calm but serious. "Because no one else would," she frowned. "But you don't even know me." "I don't need to know you," he replied. "I only need to know what they did was wrong. And I won't stand by when I see something wrong." His words struck her like a blade and a bomb at the same time. She had lived her whole life surrounded by people who turned away when cruelty appeared. But this human didn't turn away. He stood, even when it put him in danger. She wrapped the coat tighter around herself. "Humans are strange," he almost smiled. "So I've been told." For a while, they sat in silence, the broken city groaning softly in the wind. Then distant sounds began to echo, outside boots striking the ground, voices calling orders. "Patrols." The girl's eyes widened in fear, and she looked to the human. He raised a hand, signaling her to stay quiet. Slowly he moved to the doorway, peeking out into the night. Dozens of soldiers were marching through the streets. Their armor glowed faintly, their weapons ready. They were searching. The human's jaw tightened. They weren't just searching the city at random. They were hunting. The girl whispered, her voice shaking. "They're looking for us." He nodded once. "Yes, they don't like to be disobeyed." Her breath caught. If they find us, they'll kill you. They'll—" She couldn't finish the sentence. He looked back at her, his eyes steady. "Then we make sure they don't find us." He led her deeper into the building, through broken halls and stairways, until they reached a hidden corner beneath fallen beams. It was dark, but safe enough. They crouched together, listening as the patrol passed outside. The girl pressed her hands together, trying to stop them from shaking. The human noticed and whispered, "Breathe, slow, they'll pass." She tried to do as he said, closing her eyes, matching her breath to his calm rhythm. And slowly, the panic began to ease. The voices outside grew fainter, the boots fading into the distance. Finally, the human let out a quiet breath of relief. "They're gone. For now." The girl looked at him in wonder. "How can you be so calm?" He thought for a moment before answering. "Fear doesn't help. Action does." She studied him closely. His face was scarred, his eyes hardened, but behind that strength was something she had never seen before. Something unshakable. Something she wished she could carry inside herself. "You're not like the others," she whispered. "You're different." He shook his head slightly. "I'm just human." But to her, that word began to mean more than she had ever imagined. The night stretched on, and though the city outside was filled with danger, inside that broken shelter, she felt something new. For the first time, she wasn't waiting for death. For the first time, she believed survival might be possible. And it was because of him. As she leaned back against the wall, exhaustion finally pulling her into sleep, she thought of one simple truth. Humans were not weak. They were something else entirely. And this was only the beginning. The morning came slowly, gray lights spilling through the cracks of the ruined building. The alien girl woke first, the heavy coat still wrapped around her small body. For a moment, she forgot where she was. The warmth of the coat, the silence, it almost felt safe. But then the sound of distant explosions shook the ground, and the memory of war rushed back. The human was already awake, leaning against the wall, his weapon across his knees. His eyes were tired but sharp, always watching. He noticed her stirring and gave a small nod. "Time to move," he said. She pushed herself up, her legs still weak. "Where will we go?" "Out of the city," he replied. "Too many soldiers here. If they tighten their patrols, we'll be trapped." The thought made her chest tighten. Leaving the city meant entering the wild, dangerous wastelands where even more horrors waited. But staying here was worse. She nodded, trusting his judgment. They stepped back into the broken streets. The air was heavy with smoke, the ground littered with broken glass and twisted metal. The girl kept close to him, her eyes darting at every sound. He moved quickly, guiding her through side alleys, keeping them away from open roads. But trouble came sooner than either expected. Voices echoed from behind them, sharp and commanding. "Soldiers." The human's head turned quickly, his hand pushing the girl against the wall. "Stay down," he whispered. She crouched low, her heart pounding as a squad of alien soldiers came into view. Their armor was polished, their weapons advanced, and their eyes cruel. They moved with purpose, scanning every corner. The human's jaw tightened. There were too many to fight openly. But if they were caught standing still, it would be over. He took a breath, steady and calm. Then he looked back at her. "Do you trust me?" he asked. Her throat tightened. She didn't even hesitate. "Yes." He gave a quick nod. "Then follow me, stay low." He led her through a broken gap in the wall, slipping silently into the shadows. They crawled through the ruins, every step quiet, every breath measured. But the soldiers were close, their voices growing louder. Suddenly, one of the soldiers stopped. His head turned. His eyes narrowed. He had seen movement. "Over there!" he shouted. Blaster fire lit up the ruins, sparks exploding around them. The girl gasped, covering her head, but the human grabbed her hand firmly. "Run!" They sprinted through the rubble, soldiers chasing behind. Shots flew past them, striking the ground and walls, but somehow the human kept pulling her forward, never slowing down. His strength felt endless, his grip unbreakable. They reached the edge of the street, but ahead was a barricade of fallen stone and twisted steel. The girl's heart sank. "We're trapped." The human didn't stop. He threw his weapon over his shoulder, scooped her into his arms, and climbed the rubble with sheer force. She held on tightly, her breath caught between fear and awe. His muscles strained, his boots slipping on loose stone, but he kept climbing. Until they reached the top, blaster fire struck just behind them, the heat of it burning her skin. She gasped, but the human shielded her with his body, taking the brunt of the blast on his back. He groaned in pain but did not let go. With a final push, he leapt down the other side, landing hard but steady. The soldiers shouted in frustration, firing wildly, but the rubble slowed them. The human kept running, carrying her until they were far enough to catch their breath in the ruins of another building. He set her down gently, his chest rising and falling fast, blood seeping through his torn shirt where the blast had hit. "You're hurt again," she whispered, tears filling her eyes. He shook his head, his voice firm. "I'm alive, that's enough." She pressed her hands to his chest, desperate, her voice trembling. "Why? Why do you risk everything for me?" His eyes softened for the first time since she met him. "Because you deserve to live. Because no one deserves what they did to you, and because that's what it means to be human." Her breath caught. His words sank deep inside her, breaking something open in her heart. She didn't know why, but tears spilled down her face. Not tears of shame this time, but something else. Something she didn't have a name for. Before she could answer, another explosion shook the ground. The human grabbed his weapon, standing tall again. His strength seemed endless, his will unshakable. But she could see the pain in his eyes, the scars, the weight he carried. And in that moment, she made a silent promise to herself. She would not let him fight alone. She would not be just the girl who needed saving. If he was willing to protect her, then she would find the strength to stand beside him. The city still burned, the soldiers still hunted, and the war was far from over. But something had changed. It was no longer just a human protecting an alien girl. It was two souls standing together against a galaxy that had forgotten mercy. The day grew darker, though the sun was still high. Thick smoke covered the skies, turning everything gray. The human and the girl moved through the ruins, every street silent except for the distant thunder of war. The city was collapsing piece by piece, and soon there would be nothing left. The girl stayed close, but she no longer walked with only fear. Something inside her had changed. Each time she looked at the human, at his wounds, at the way he still stood strong, she felt her own weakness turning into something else. For the first time, she wanted to fight, even if her body still trembled. They stopped in a ruined square. Statues lay broken on the ground, the faces of old leaders shattered into dust. The human leaned against a wall, his breath heavy, his wounds slowing him down more than he wanted to admit. He tried to hide it, but she could see the pain in his eyes. "You need to rest," she said firmly. "We don't have time," he replied, his voice tight. She stepped closer, pulling at his arm until he sat down. "You gave me your coat. You saved me again and again. Now let me do something for you." He looked at her, surprised by the strength in her tone. She tore a strip of cloth from the coat's lining and wrapped it around his wound. Her hands shook, but she forced herself to keep steady. He didn't stop her. Instead, for the first time, he allowed someone else to care for him. "You're stronger than you think," he said quietly. Her heart quickened at the words, and she pressed the bandage tighter. "I only try because of you." Before he could answer, the sound of voices rose from the streets around them. Dozens of alien soldiers marched closer. This time, it wasn't a patrol. It was a full squad, their armor gleaming, their banners carried high. The girl's eyes widened. They're everywhere. She whispered. The human gritted his teeth. They're sweeping the city. They want to make sure no one escapes. He stood again, his weapon ready, but his body swayed with fatigue. The girl grabbed his arm. You can't fight them all. His jaw tightened. Then I'll take as many as I can. Her chest filled with panic. She couldn't let him do this alone. Something inside her screamed that if she stood back again, she would lose him and she would lose herself. No, she said, her voice trembling but clear. We fight together. He stared at her, shocked, but she did not lower her gaze. She was afraid, but her fear no longer controlled her. The soldiers spread across the square, the commander stepping forward. He pointed at the human and the Kiko. Girl, there they are. Kill the human. Bring the girl alive. The girl felt her body freeze. Alive. She knew what that meant: chains, humiliation, endless torment. Not again. Never again. The human raised his weapon, firing first. The square erupted with light and thunder. Soldiers shouted, blasters fired, rubble exploded into dust. The girl ducked behind cover, but her heart screamed at her not to hide. She picked up a broken piece of stone and hurled it at the nearest soldier. It struck his head, staggering him long enough for the human to finish him with a shot. Her hands shook, but her eyes burned with something new. She crawled closer to the human, throwing rocks, grabbing weapons dropped by fallen soldiers, and even striking at one soldier who came too close. For the first time, she was not the helpless one. The human fought like a storm, every shot precise, every move protecting her as much as himself. But what made the battle different now was the girl. She was no longer just behind him, she was beside him, adding her strength, however small. The battle raged for what felt like hours. One by one, the soldiers fell until only silence remained. The square was filled with smoke and broken bodies. The girl collapsed to her knees, her chest heaving, her hands dirty with dust and blood. She looked at the human, expecting to see disappointment, but instead he gave her a look she would never forget. Pride. You fought, he said simply. You didn't give up. Her eyes filled with tears, but this time they were not from shame. I was afraid. So was I, he replied. But being afraid doesn't mean you stop. That's what makes us strong. She looked at him with new eyes. Not as just her protector, but as something more: a teacher, a symbol, maybe even a friend. And deep inside, she felt a fire growing. If he could fight for her, then she could fight for others. The city still burned. The enemy still ruled. But in that square, among the ruins and silence, something powerful had begun. It was no longer just a story of one human protecting one alien girl. It was the beginning of resistance. The city was almost gone. Towers that once touched the skies were now broken teeth of stone and steel. Smoke curled upward, hiding the stars, and the sound of battle echoed from every direction. The human and the alien girl stood in the ruins of the square, their bodies weak, but their hearts unbroken. They knew more soldiers would come. The silence after the fight was only a moment of rest before the storm returned. The human checked his weapon, his face calm, though his body shook with exhaustion. His wounds had grown worse, but he did not complain. The girl stayed close, her eyes filled with fear, but also with determination. Where do we go now? She whispered. He looked toward the horizon, where faint lights flickered in the distance. There's an old transport bay beyond the city. If we can reach it, maybe we can get out. The girl swallowed hard. And if we can't? His voice was steady. Then we make sure they remember us. They moved quickly through the ruins, every sound around them sharp, every step dangerous. Patrols filled the streets, but together they slipped past them, hiding in shadows, moving with silent purpose. The girl no longer stumbled as she once had. She moved with him, trusting his guidance, but also carrying her own strength, now dotted. Last, they reached the transport bay. It was half destroyed, ships scattered like broken toys. But among them was one vessel, small and battered, yet still intact. Hope stirred in her heart. Before they could reach it, the ground shook. From the far end of the bay, soldiers poured in dozens, then hundreds. At their head marched a commander, taller, stronger, his armor gleaming red. His voice echoed like thunder. Human, surrender now, and the girl lives. Resist, and you both die. The girl froze, terror washing over her. She knew this commander. He had been the one who ordered her humiliation. He had been the one who laughed as she was left to suffer. Seeing him again made her knees weak, but the human stepped forward, placing himself between her and the soldiers, just as he always had. His weapon was raised, though his hands trembled from weakness. She lives either way, the human said firmly. Because you're not taking her again, the commander laughed. One human against all of us. Foolish. The human's voice cut through the air like steel. No, human. And then the battle began. The soldiers charged, blasters firing, the bay filling with smoke and fire. The human fought with everything left in him. His movements were slower now, his body battered. But his will was unshakable. The girl tried to fight too, grabbing weapons from fallen soldiers, striking, throwing, anything she could do. But the numbers were overwhelming. The human took blast after blast, his body staggering but never falling. He shielded her again and again, every wound making him weaker, but his eyes never lost their fire. Finally, he dropped to one knee, blood running down his arm. The girl cried out, rushing to his side. No, please don't leave me. He looked at her, his breath heavy, his voice soft but clear. You're stronger now. You can fight. You can live. Promise me you'll keep going. Tears streamed down her face. I can't without you. Yes. You can, he said, placing the coat tighter around her shoulders. Because that's what it means to be human. To fight even when you're afraid. To protect even when it hurts. Now go. The commander stepped forward, raising his weapon to strike. But the human, with the last of his strength, surged upward. He grabbed a fallen explosive, armed it, and hurled it toward the soldiers. The blast shook the entire bay, fire swallowing the commander and his men. The shockwave threw the girl to the ground. When the smoke cleared, the human lay still, his body broken, but the path to the ship was open. The girl crawled to him, her tears falling on his face. His eyes flickered open for one last moment. You're not alone anymore, he whispered. And then he was gone. The girl pressed her forehead to his, her heart breaking, but inside her chest, the fire he had lit burned brighter than ever. She rose, pulling the coat tightly around her, and looked at the ship ahead. The enemy was broken, but not gone. The war was not over. Yet she carried with her the strength of the one human who had shown her what mercy, courage, and hope truly meant. She climbed aboard the ship, her hands shaking but steady enough to power it up. As it lifted into the smoky sky, she looked down at the ruins below. He had given everything for her. And now she would give everything to carry his legacy. In the end, the story was not just about a human protecting an alien girl. It was about humanity itself, about the spirit that could not be broken, even by an entire galaxy. And as the stars opened before her, the girl whispered a vow into the endless night. They will remember him. They will remember humans. The stars stretched endlessly, cold and silent, as the ship drifted away from the burning city. The alien girl sat in the pilot's seat, her small hands trembling against the controls. She had never flown before, but somehow the ship seemed to respond to her desperation. Every button pressed, every switch turned, was guided by the thought that she could not fail now. Wrapped tightly in the human's coat, she stared out the viewport. The planet below was covered in smoke, its cities falling into ruin. She thought of him, the human who had walked into her life when everyone else turned away, the human who had given her hope, who had given her the strength to fight. Her chest ached with grief, but behind the grief burned something stronger. She whispered softly to herself, "I will not let them forget you." The ship shook as alarms blared. A small squad of enemy fighters had spotted her escape. Sleek and fast, they closed in quickly, their weapons glowing red. For a moment, fear paralyzed her again. But then she remembered his words, "Fear doesn't help. Action does." Her trembling fingers steadied. She gripped the controls tighter, weaving the ship between blasts of fire. The vessel groaned, metal straining, but she pushed it harder, her green eyes glowing with determination. One of the fighters lined up behind her, preparing the killing shot. Her breath caught in her throat. But then, instinct, or perhaps the fire he left within her, guided her hands. She rolled the ship sharply, the blast missing by inches, and dived low into the atmosphere. The enemy followed, but in the chaos of smoke and wreckage, two of them collided, exploding into fire. Only one remained. She could see it behind her, closing in. Her ship was damaged, her energy almost gone. She could run, but she knew running forever was impossible. The enemy would always come. She thought of him again, of the way he had stood in front of her, unafraid. She clenched her jaw. "No more running," she whispered. She flipped the ship hard, turning straight into the enemy's path. Weapons lit up, fire blazing across the sky. She aimed the last of her ship's cannons and fired. The blast struck true, and the fighter erupted in flames, falling into the ruins below. The girl sat back, her chest heaving, her face wet with tears. She had survived. Not because she was saved, but because she had chosen to fight. Just as he had taught her, the ship, damaged but flying, finally broke through the clouds into the black silence of space. The stars stretched before her, endless and bright. Somewhere out there, she knew, others were suffering just as she had. Others were being crushed, humiliated, forgotten. But now she was no longer helpless. She pulled the coat tighter around her shoulders, as if the human strength still wrapped her in its warmth. She opened the ship's old comm system and recorded a message, her voice soft but clear. "This is not the end. I am alive because a human showed me mercy. He gave me hope when no one else would. He gave me the courage to fight. If you hear this, know that humans are not weak. They are not fragile. They are stronger than any empire because they carry something more powerful than fear. They carry compassion. And I will carry his memory into the stars." She ended the message, sending it into the wide galaxy, carried by radio waves to anyone who might listen. Perhaps no one would hear it. Perhaps everyone would. But it did not matter. The words were spoken, and they were true. The girl set a new course, not away, not hiding, but toward the unknown. Toward resistance. Toward others who needed the same hope she had been given. Her tears dried as her eyes hardened with purpose. She was no longer only the alien girl who had been humiliated in the streets. She was a survivor, a fighter, and the living proof of what one human's courage could do. And as the stars opened wide before her, she spoke one last vow into the silence. "I will make them remember him. And I will make them remember humanity."